Oh, Lyndon, you did not. You 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 did an amazing job. You did not disappoint. You should see the chat box, and I know that you're really, really busy. Thank you. Wonderful presentation, all of the above, and I totally agree. And there's a host of questions. So we're going to try to jump in. I took so many notes. I mean, you kept throwing out additional information, and I kept going back and writing them down and coming back because you break the information down in such simple terms where everyone can understand. And for me, what my takeaway is to go out and do additional learning. And like you said, not to burden someone else by asking tons of questions. It's okay, but I took so many notes that I'm going to go back and do some research on because I want to reinforce what I've heard today. It's that powerful. It is just that powerful. So let's jump into these questions for those who are still here, and most of them are still here. They want to hear what you have to say, Lyndon. I noticed, and you might have mentioned this, I noticed Lyndon's self-identification was he, him, and they, them. Why and why does that mean? I generally see either or not both.
Great question. Mm-hmm. I've been seeing more and more people ask about this recently, like because they're seeing people use two sets of pronouns that they go by. Right, for people who do kind of use different sets in different places, there are all sorts of different reasons. Quick note, I'm going to put something Largo can put for everybody, but some additional resources, cool pronoun video and everything. So for some people, using different pronouns at different spaces is about a safety thing, right? It's that they may use something in one space and another thing in another space. It might be that they feel more comfortable with certain people using certain things. It may be that they have a preference for one, but are okay with another. For me, honestly, it's that I tried to go by they, them 20 something years ago, and nobody would do it. And so I started to use he, him because it just felt better. And I know that I intentionally didn't disclose that, like, I was assigned female at birth. And so going by he, him for me was about really asserting to people that I wasn't a girl. So at this point, he, him works better for me in my life. Honestly, no pronouns actually feel good, but that's the one that feels less bad. And I'm going to be really honest, it's advantageous for me in my work. Even though I teach this stuff, right? But I know that if I can use he, him pronouns, it gets me in the door. Because A, it's in the masculine, and B, it is a binary looking pronoun, right? And then I can give them more of me. Yeah. I might use they, them a little bit more with youth because I trust that, like, quite honestly, youth actually see my gender more. They get it. So I use different things in different spaces. You know, as an example, I prefer that my sister call me her sibling, but when she needs to make a quick thing, I'm okay with her saying brother. It works okay. I have my preference, but I'm okay with some other things.
Thank you, Lyndon. Code switching for African American. We had a conversation about that in February, and as you were talking, you brought so many spaces that you code switch.
Yes.
And I just didn't know it was to that degree. Okay, I have a conversation all day, but I need to get to some of these questions because here are the questions. The next one is, how do you manage an era? You call someone a she, and that's really not their personal gender identity. How do you manage that?
Well, so first I want to say you're spot on about the code switching. It's often how I talk about this as well. And I'm constantly doing that in my life. Absolutely. I'm sure you can understand that.
Isn't it exhausting?
It's exhausting,
I'll
right?
say no
And
more.
which is also to say, right, for like, particularly my Black trans friends, they're doing both of those, right?
Yes.
You and I
Intersectionality.
are only dealing with one, other folks are dealing with both. So in terms of making those errors, there's those mistakes. I want to say it feels bad to make a mistake, right? Like, and also we've made mistakes with people's pronouns before and we didn't even realize it. And it's so easy, like I said, to want to kind of do that defensiveness to say, oh, but I didn't mean to, or hey, I'm getting used to it. Particularly if you've known the person a long time. You know, it's your child, for example, you named them something, and it's really hard to make that switch. Absolutely. And so it's really easy to kind of put the burden back on them, I think, to say like, oh, be patient with me. I'm learning. But I also think it's quite inappropriate to do so. It's very tempting, but inappropriate. You know, Fanny, if I said something that I didn't realize was racist, and you told me that I just said something that was racist, it would probably feel pretty bad for you if I was like, oh, you know, don't take it personally. I'm learning. Please be patient with me. It's going to take some time for me to be less racist. You know, like, no, what I should say is, thank you. I'm going to give that some more thought. And then I move on, right? And I actually give it some more thought and I do my research. What I learned about when people make mispronouncing mistakes, if I truly ask myself, when I make a mistake about somebody's pronouns, right? If I have a trans woman in my life and I accidentally call her he, if I really ask myself, why did I do that? It's not just a slip of the tongue. It's that I actually don't see her as a woman. And that, yeah, right? That feels awful to acknowledge. Wow. And so it's not her responsibility to be patient with me. It's not her responsibility to listen to my excuses. It's my responsibility to investigate why it is that I don't see her the way she sees herself and who she is. I need to work on that as the person who made the mistake. I need to change.
So what you're saying, Lyndon, when that mistake is made, I haven't made space in my brain yet.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Wow.
I mean,
Learn that
look,
today.
I'm part, okay, so I'm gonna, because many of your people do also work with kids, I'm gonna give you my friend's 5-year-old's way of saying this. So we're gonna talk about body parts for a second. But I think this is helpful for any medical providers on here, helpful for families, etc. But my friend's 5-year-old said, look, most boys have penises, but some don't. And most girls have vaginas, but some don't. And I thought that was such a sweet way of saying it, right? But he's also so accurate. And look, if a 5-year-old gets that, adults can get that. Like, look, you should never be surprised about somebody's gender or somebody's body if you just remember that, like, there's actually a lot of different ways that bodies exist. And there's a lot of different ways that genders exist. The more you remember that, the easier it'll be and the less surprised you'll be.
Yes. We must all come as little children.
Yeah, I mean, look,
Some don't. Yes.
I use that phrase, like I use that example when I teach doctors. They're like, oh, yeah, it's true.
Yes,
Right?
yes, 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 yes.
So anyway.
So this leading to the next question, and this you may have answered it beforehand, but the question is, how do you suggest educators and parents go about not placing gender expectations on children?
I'm going to stop my share while we do this. Okay. So how do we, I give a whole training on that. So I think, so a big part of it is language, right? It's like degendering all of the language that we're using, or being specific about gendered language when it's necessary. And so It means things like not lining up our kids by gender, girls here and boys here, not dividing people by gender. Look, it's not accurate. Also, that like reinforces to intersex kids. Like, look, even if you don't want to get on board with trans people, get on board with the fact that intersex kids exist. And like, that's a really hard space for them to be into, right? So we don't line them up that way. We do it by cats and dogs. We do it by who has siblings and doesn't, like something else, right? We don't say, hey, boys and girls. We say, okay, friends, to our little ones. We don't say it to high schoolers. They don't like that.
Say for high schoolers, if you don't.
Oh, I just say like, okay, class, or all right, everyone. My mentor said y'all growing up. So even though I'm born in Maine, I say y'all. Because y'all means all.
Yeah.
So you know, those are helpful. And then I think it's the interjections, right? It's the when somebody says boys can't wear pink, we say, of course they can. So we correct it. We can humanize it. We can say, oh, you know, your cousin so-and-so, he wears pink, right? We can say, well, I'm a boy and I like pink, right? Are you saying that I'm not a boy? So we can personalize it in that way. But I think one of the best things is that we can engage in conversation with kids around it. Oh, if we have the time for it, you know, oh, what makes you say that? And we can interrogate it, right? When kids ask me, are you a boy or a girl? Sometimes my answer is no. And sometimes my answer is, right when I have time for it, sometimes my answer is, oh, well, what do you think? And they'll say, well, you have long hair and nose piercing, but you've got a beard and you were wearing this, right? And so they'll kind of pick it apart. And I'll say, well, do you know some boys that have long hair? Do you know some girls that wear flannel shirts? You know, like there's actually a lot of women that have facial hair. That's pretty normal. So we just start to like normalize every type of body and every type of gender expression. And I think when we get inquisitive with youth, we start to help their critique and their processing of that. And that in turn helps them actually step in when kids are being bullied, right? So if they know that we can say, well, boys can wear pink, then the next time they see a kid getting bullied for wearing pink, right, they can step in and they can be that friend. So this isn't just about creating good spaces for trans and non-binary kids, right? This is about creating good spaces for all kids and teaching them how to be like good, healthy friends. Yeah. God, that's such an important part of early childhood education, you know?
It is. Thank you. That is so beautiful.
Yeah. The other thing, I'm just going to note this real quick in there.
Go on.
Is that what I say to parents is, I guess, two major things. One is, as soon as your kid has the ability to like pick clothes or pick toys, have them make those decisions, right? So go into the clothing store and don't just lead them to the section that they're supposed to do. Show them the options and talk about what they want. Go into the toy store, right? When I was growing up, it was certainly pink and blue aisles, but go into the toy store and don't lead them to a certain thing. Ask them what works for them within financial reason. And, you know, so like as soon as they have the agency to do that, that's like part of also, I mean, building choices for kids is a part of healthy development as well, right? The other thing that I tell parents is, I don't think that you have to like raise your kid gender neutral. I think that is an option that some people do, but I'm not encouraging everybody to do that. What I do think we can do is at early ages, we can say to kids, we named you this and we call you this. If you ever think that we made a mistake, let us know. Right? Sometimes parents and doctors made a mistake in what they call people. And you just have to let us know. If you find that something is different than what we called you, that's great. You know, and so just like creating the space to say that teaches kids from an early age that it's okay if somebody made an incorrect assessment about them, that they actually do have the agency to speak up. So that's why we're seeing more and more younger kids come out at younger ages. It's not because, again, it's not catching on. It's that there are more people who are creating the kind of space to have those conversations so kids can be honest at earlier ages.
Yeah.
And again, that is healthy for kids. It is really good for their mental health to be able to express that at early ages.
Yes, 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 yes. There are more questions. I'm looking at the time, and I really want you to talk about Florida and Texas before we get off this call.
Yeah.
So I'm going to throw this. I'm going to throw this question out, and then I want you to talk about Florida and Texas. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Got you.
So, what is your response? This is a question that one of our participants asked. What is your response to people who say, "What does an 8-year-old know about what sex they are?"
That's a great question. When did you figure out that you were a boy or a girl? Right? I mean, look, nobody ever looked at my sister, you know, at 3, at 5, at 8, at 12 and said, like, are you sure you're a girl? No, she said she was a girl and we believed her. So the reality is that kids, and this was, I didn't note it on the slide back then, but you know what? I'm going to pull it up because I think this is important. So let me just reshare this real quick. Okay. So when we think about childhood gender development, we know that kids actually, this is like, there's so much research on this, but there are different stages of gender development that occur between ages like 2 and 7. And that for the most part, gender sets in around like age 5. People have kind of some decent sense of that. But again, that doesn't mean that everybody is equipped with the language or the space to say something about it at early ages. So we know that actually trans kids develop their sense of gender identity at the same age as cisgender kids, because gender development happens around the same time. So that's why we say somebody's not too young. And also there's an interesting double standard, right? That like when somebody comes out at 30 or 50, they're then met with, well, if you were really trans, you would have said something when you were younger. So there's no good time. Excuse me. I break this down to 3 categories when it comes to kids. First is that that when adults notice some type of gender expansiveness, gender nonconformity in children, but the children aren't articulating yet. The second is when youth express that they're questioning their gender. And the third is when youth are telling us that they know who they are. So here's how we respond to each. If adults are noticing this, but a kid hasn't said anything yet, just continue to support them doing their thing. Don't apply pressure to squash their gender, but also you have to apply pressure for them to be trans. They'll figure out in their own space and time. Again, just provide the space for them to express themselves in whatever way works for them. And I'm going to simplify this, and this is, you'd say this depending on, you can say this in different ways depending on different ages, but generally the way that I explain transgender to kids is, you know, when people are born, the doctor says this person is a boy or this person is a girl. And depending on the age, you might say based on their body parts. And for most people, the doctor got it right. But for some people, the doctor got it wrong. For the people who got it, for the people where the doctor got it wrong, that's called transgender. It means that sometimes somebody said they were a girl and they actually feel like a boy. Sometimes somebody said they were a boy, they actually feel like a girl. Sometimes people don't feel like boys or girls. Isn't that cool? And the kid's like, yeah, I'm gonna go play at recess now, right? They're fine. They get it. It's fine. So we can have those conversations early. If you're already talking about gender and bodies with kids, you can talk with them about this too. For youth who are questioning their gender, they're unsure, the best thing we can do is just be a sounding board for them, let them know that we are a safe place for them to explore that, and let them know that whatever they figure out about themselves is totally fine. And that I have kids come to me and they're like, I don't know what I am, and what is the word I should use? And I say, I can't tell you that, but I can tell you that it's okay to question for a long time. It's okay to never figure it out. It's okay to figure it out now and then figure out something new about yourself in the future. It is okay. Guess what? Humans figure out new things about ourselves all the time. That's beautiful. And the third is that, again, if they tell us who they are, we believe them. And I want to say this very clearly. Even if you think it's not real, or that they're wrong about themselves, or that they're something else, right? Fine. Believe them now, and then believe them if it changes. If we try to tell a kid they're not who they are when they're telling us who they are, that creates a bad relationship to the kid. They don't trust us. That damages rapport, and that's going to affect other types of conversations in the future with kids. But also, that's really just bad for their mental health, right? What happens if you tell a kid that you think they're wrong and they are not? We've really just done some damage. Kids want to be believed. Trust me, if they did get it wrong, it'll settle out in its own time without any problem. If a kid goes by a new name and then figures out that that's not what they want to go by, so what? You go back to calling them a different name. There's not damage in that. There's not harm in that. There's only good.
Right.
There you go. So you have questions about laws.
Yes. I would like for you to talk a little bit. I'd love your opinion on what's happening in Florida first, and then Texas. For those of you who may not have seen it, popped up on my phone an alert, and it was on TV, and The View had something on this, and it was about the bill that Florida is putting forth about the word gay not being allowed in the school system. And I'd love your opinion about that, Lyndon.
Absolutely. And Elijah, I'm dropping something in, more resources in the chat for you, folks. So there's like 4 major legal things going on right now across states. And I want to say one is that there are a lot of bills banning transgender kids from sports right now in many states, which is really difficult. Think about, for so many of us, sports were like an integral part of our health and our community and our friendships. There really is no reason to ban trans kids from playing in kids' sports. There's a lot of information on this. I can talk about another time. The Florida thing, right, is that there's a law that seeks to essentially limit talking about sexual orientation and gender identity in schools. And so it would essentially prevent teachers and other folks from talking about how people are gay or people are trans, right? It forbids them to talk about reality. So as you can imagine, that's pretty damaging for so many reasons. It also, my argument is that if you don't want us talking about sexual orientation or gender identity, that means like we, in theory, can't talk about healthy relationships for heterosexual people, because we would be talking about sexual orientation. It means that we can't talk about, I don't know, like empowerment programs for girls that exist in the school, because that's about gender identity. So I think that there are some really tricky things here. But Fanny, as you brought up to me prior to us getting started today, there was a huge school walkout from students in Florida. We're seeing pushback from high school students and college students across the country right now. It's really powerful. Look, like the 3 things I'm about to talk about, the Florida bill being one of them, these are incredibly damaging for children. Like, I'm gonna be real, I'm really worried about suicide rates going up. Like really, really worried. I wish I could say that I was being hyperbolic about that. I'm not. The Texas thing is, I can't, oh man. The Texas governor asked for people to report the parents of trans youth to Child Protective Services, to report supporting your child as being trans, particularly in any type of medical way, to report that as child abuse, which of course puts families in such intense jeopardy. And this law's coming back and forth, like a judge blocked it and then unblocked something, and it's back and forth right now, but it's really scary. It's really, really scary. And I just have to say, like, as a Jewish person, it just like, it makes me think of like the hunts to find the Jews during the Holocaust, right? It's like, find them, expose them, report them. That's so scary, right? And then the thing in Idaho, wait, and actually I'm gonna go back to Texas for a second, just to be very clear, they're like, minors are not having surgeries. There are a few exceptions to that, and they're for older minors. And when it is very clearly medically necessary, because it is essential to the mental health of that child. I also want to point out that one of the medical interventions that do exist for kids is pubertal blockers. I mentioned it earlier, and that acts as a pause button on the pubescent process. It's an option in a greater toolbox of working with trans kids. It's the same medication that's given to children with early onset puberty. So we know that it's safe, effective, been used for many, many years, and reversible. And that's the key thing, is it's reversible. So a 10-year-old who is trans, who wants to change their body in the future, can go onto a pubertal blocker, pause button on their pubescent process, until they reach an age where they can start on hormones in a way that does work for them. And if they figure out that they don't want to do that, then the blocker is lifted and their body just continues down the path it would have anyways, totally reversible. It's a really, really good option, because if a kid changes their mind, there's no problem with that. So anyway, Idaho, I know we're about at time here. Idaho is, and I wish I could say I was making this up, there is a law being put forth right now that would have life sentences for medical providers who provided gender affirming care for trans minors. Life sentences. I'm speechless. So that's the state of the US right now. And I want to also say, like, there's incredible work being done among trans communities across the country right now. Like, our communities are brilliant and resourceful and creative. We have an amazing history of activism. Like, there are so many amazing trans people doing such good things in the world. And I think it's an important protective factor, particularly for kids and young adults, is to get them connected with groups, people like them, with resources, like, so that they don't feel so alone, and so they can see healthy adult role models. I don't know if I'm a healthy adult role model, but so they can see that there are like ways of being alive trans adults. That is so crucial. So that's where I'm going to end that.
Totally phenomenal. Totally. Presentation, beginning to end. And all the folks that have hung in here through this last half hour feels the same way, with all the comments of thanking you. A big takeaway for me is making space in the brain and in our hearts. We must. The thought of suicide rates going up because of these bills it saddens one, you know. And so my gift to all of you is that we, wherever we are, can make space in our brains, and we can make space in our heart for all of us, right? Right, Lyndon? For all of us. And I just want to say thank you so very much for this amazing presentation. I want to thank all of you who came and listened and stayed through the Q&A period, because you could have spent your time anywhere else, but you chose to spend it with us. And for that, we say thank you for making space for all of us. And as we gift you back your day, we want you to have the best day ever as you continue to make space for all of us. Thank you again, Lyndon, and thank you all for being a participant today.